And suddenly there is Christmas. And that's why we're talking about statistics. Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Øystein and I'm trying to become a bookworm. And in that process I hope to inspire you to do the same. In this video we're going to talk about books, but we're going to talk about the numbers. Of course this channel is all about starting to read, and in that process I have to talk about my feelings surrounding the books. But I thought it would be useful to look at the numbers and the statistics just to get a feel of the other side of reading, because the numbers are always going. The numbers are always working, something like that. When I read, the numbers go up. So now I thought that we would take a look at what Goodreads has to say about my reading this year. So when I started reading this year, I decided to make an account on Goodreads. For those who are not familiar with Goodreads, it's a site where you can log all your books and you can rate them and sort of get an overview of what you have been reading and what you would like to read. Sort of a social media for book lovers. On this site you can make your own reading goals for each year, so I decided to make a reading goal for 2021. My reading goal was based on past failures, so I put my reading goal to 8 books this year. And I put it to 8 books because that's how many months were left of the year, including May. So I thought if I'm going to read, I may be able to read 1 book a month. I later decided to make a YouTube channel to talk about my reading so I could remember all I've read, and here we are. So my reading goal for this year is 8 books, and I can compare that number to the actual books I read so far, and that's 31. So I've reached my goal with 388%. If I'm not completely mistaken, that will amount to 400% when I finish reading the book I'm currently reading. Yay me! I'm of course extremely happy with this. My reading goal for next year will be higher, but how high I don't know yet, so we'll just keep in touch. Like many other social media platforms these days, Goodreads also makes a little rundown for you of what the past year has been like. And so this video I thought I'd go through what that looks like. As you can see here, I read 31 books, and this amounts to 10,762 pages. I can't begin to describe how happy I am that I reached over 10,000 pages this year. That was nothing that I've thought about before I started reading, because that number is just so surreal to someone that hasn't been reading a lot before. So 31 books I can comprehend, but the 10,000 pages is just like, I don't have any really strong opinions about this next topic, but if you set your reading goal to a high number of books, you sort of can end up reading a lot of short books just because they're short. That's no issue if you don't have any issue with it, but that can be an outcome of a high book number. Sort of glad that the only thing I focused on this year is just read the things you want to read, even though that hasn't always been successful. And next we have which is the shortest and which is the longest book, and neither of these I loved. So the shortest book is The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I just did not enjoy that book at all. And The Brothers Karamazov was maybe the one book I felt like I had to read this year. I'm a little bit proud that I read it, even though the Norwegian version was 991 pages or something like that. I was a bit disappointed that it was not over 1,000, but that's just the way it is. For those who have really mathematical brains, you might have figured it out, but my average book in 2021 is 347 pages, which I feel like every book I've read recently is 347 pages, so it fits. The most popular book on Goodreads that I've read this year is also my favorite book. I don't know what that tells about me, but that's All the Light We Cannot See, that 2,666,304 people have shelved. I think that means that they might have read it or not read it or want to read it, just that they've mentioned it in some way. And the least popular is actually the first book I decided to read this year, and that's Niel's Klims' Journey to the Underground by Ludvig Holberg, and only 1,169 people have shelved that book. Also a book I did not enjoy. Very slow, in my opinion. And the next number on my list is something that I think is very interesting, and that's the average rating I've given my books. Because when I started out reading books this year, I was kinda very positive towards all the books I read. So the scale is from 1 star to 5 stars, and Many of the books I started reading were either 4 or 5 stars, and then I thought about it, and after a little while I started giving them 1 star less. So I ended up giving them 3.6. I'm kinda happy that it's under 4, but I would have liked reading more excellent books. And then we have the highest rated book on Goodreads that I've read this year, and that's of course The Final Empire, the first book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. And I say of course because so many of these high fantasy books, especially from series in my head at least, are very highly rated. That was also a 3-star book. Kind of boring. I would like to see more of the books I loved on this list, but these are the statistics. And then I thought we would dig a little deeper because statistics are fun. Here are the 31 books I've read this year, and if I go to details, I've hit a bad link. Don't panic. And then a quote from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That doesn't help me a bit. Reading stats, and then details. Here we are. So here we can see all the books that I've given 5 stars and 2 stars and 4 and 3. Mostly 3 stars. In the start, mostly 4 stars. Might be some of the 4 stars that should have been 3 stars. Well, I don't know. I struggle with this in my head for each book I read. And then I thought we would look at something that I find really interesting, and that's the publication year. I would have liked to see that I read more older books. I'm a bit surprised where this journey has led me, because if someone told me in May that I would have read so many books that were published after the 2000s, I would have thought that was a joke, because in my head earlier I've always thought that I should always just read classics because they are sort of validated as good, and that's why you should read them, because all of them are great. That's not true. The books that I've loved the past year aren't the older books, so that's a huge surprise, and it's fun to see that I've read fewer and fewer older books as the journey continues. So if you can see where we started here, I had Niels Klims' Journey to the Underground as the first book, and a while after that I read Picture of Dorian Gray. Then we had the Brothers Karamazov, but after that there are quite newly published books. In November I read Brave New World, which is the oldest book that I've read since late summer. So I find this table especially interesting because it just doesn't correlate with the thoughts I had about myself as a reader when I started out. What will this sheet look like next year? That we don't know, but it's quite interesting to me at least. Then we have the overview of which books you read at what time. I don't find this table especially useful, but pages over time I find really interesting, because that's how I can look at when did I have time to read and when was I motivated to read. And you can see it's quite steady, or it looks like that, because for example in July I read The Brothers Karamazov, of course a very big book, and that amounted to 1,000 pages. But for Goodreads to register the pages you have to finish the book in that month. So if I had finished The Brothers Karamazov the 1st of August, the statistics would look wild. And yeah, May of course not the full month, and quite sturdy statistics for the rest of the year. And of course we are in December, and I hope to be reading 2 or 3 books more this month. I think we'll end up here somewhere. Hope to get over 1,500 this month. Of course, August is my biggest reading month this year with 2,459 pages. You can say I sort of understand why, and it's not because I had so much time to read. Of course, a little bit of that as well with the summer holiday. But Good Omens I really liked, and When We Cease to Understand the World I really loved. And then you have Business Adventures, which I read parts of during July and June because it was kind of heavy to read, so I needed time to digest, and I read 1 chapter here and there. And then we have All the Light We Cannot See, which I absolutely loved. Hamnet, which I did not enjoy. And then A Town Called Salad, which also was a quite quickly read book. So that was the page counts. I really like these overviews. These are nice. We are back here, and I thought I'd just get an overview of the books I read here in sort of chronological order. I read 22 male authors and 9 female authors. It's not something I think a lot about. I only try to think about which books do I want to read. Of the books I read, 5 of them are Norwegian, with The Ice Palace by Tarja Vesaas being my favorite of them. I didn't not really dislike any of the Norwegian books that much, so that's a good thing. And in general, there are a lot of American or English authors, which I highly anticipated. So I'm very glad that Benjamin Labatut and When We Cease to Understand the World is my 3rd favorite book of the year, because that makes me think that it's easier to explore different authors from around the world. One thing that really surprised me with the books that I read this year is how many of the books that has this fantasy aspect to them. And this was something I discovered when I got into the booktube community, because there are so many booktubers that are fantasy lovers. Sometimes the word seems wrong, but they like fantasy and like talking about fantasy. And so I sort of got stuck with Neil Gaiman for a while and really enjoyed that. Tried Brandon Sanderson. I don't mind the fantasy aspect now. I would have earlier, I think. So that's a very positive development for me, at least. And then the last statistic I thought I would share with you is one that will be harder to reproduce next year, but we'll see. And I'm not always good at updating this statistic than I should have been, so the next statistic is my TBR. That's something I've never really had in my life before. My TBR for 2021 is 134 books. 134 books that I would like to read. And that's a good amount. I'm very glad I put them on my TBR, because I sometimes forget the books. But then I can scroll through this list and look at the books that I want to read, or ones I thought I would like to read. So what am I going to do next year? Well, I thought I'd make a separate video about this specific topic. I will continue reading books that I feel makes me happy. I might try to read more books that were published before 1950, because I like to brag. There are other aspects to it as well, but I'm sort of trying to focus on the get happy books part. Then I might try and read more books from different countries. And lastly, next year I'm going to read more books. Hopefully. If not, that's kind of a disaster. So these were the actual numbers, and I can't really say anything else than I am extremely satisfied with the reading I've done this year. If someone told me in May this year that I would have read all these books by now, I wouldn't have believed them at all. And I can even remember what I've read, because I've talked to you about it, and that feels sincerely great. So thank you all for watching my videos and subscribing to my channel. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I'll see you soon. Bye!